Welcome to Breakfast Central. This morning we have a number of conversations and we're streaming live on YouTube. News Central TV Live is where you can join the conversation. But we're starting off with what has become one of the most controversial and biggest conversations in the past few days. Africa's richest man, Aliko Dangote, has filed a formal petition with the Independent Corrupt Practices and Other Related Offences Commission, ICPC, calling for the arrest, investigation, and prosecution of the managing director of the Nigerian Midstream and Downstream Petroleum Regulatory Authority, Engineer Farouk Ahmed.
According to the petition submitted through Dangote's legal counsel, Dr. Ogu James Onoja, senior advocate of Nigeria, the NMDPRA boss is accused of living far beyond his official means, including allegedly paying over $7 million in advanced tuition fees for his 4 children in Switzerland.
Well, this comes amid rising tensions between Dangote Group and NMDPRA over regulatory bottlenecks, particularly around the importation of refined petroleum products and licensing delays that have reportedly affected the Dangote Refinery's operations. Let's look into this conversation as the implications are indeed on the front burner, and we'll look at the development. We have Dr. Nnaemeka Obiaraeri, who's joining us, an investment banker and economist. Thank you so much for making time out to speak to us this morning.
Thanks for having me.
All right. I'm sure you have been following the drama. Many have called it a rather mild drama between two persons who over time have not in any way worn the same trousers. They've been in disagreement from time memorial since the start of the Dangote Refinery. But then again, my question to you is, what do you make of the fact that public office holders are oftentimes pointed or fingered at the exorbitant lifestyle, spending and so on? And this time, it's done by the president of Dangote, that's Aliko Dangote himself.
I think firstly, we must separate the two issues here. The issues of the authority chief of NMDPRA living above his means is a different issue from the issues of his office as a regulator, who, as much as possible, have tried to implement the provisions of the PIA. The laws are very, very clear. I'm very, very sure when he was appointed as the chief executive, authority chief executive of NDPRA, he submitted his asset declarations in the CCB form. It's left for the authorities, Mr. President, the petroleum minister, and the reporting petroleum minister, the person he's reporting to, and the EFCC and the Code of Conduct Bureau to conduct separate investigation to ascertain issues concerning that. But on the other issue of regulation, and which, because people have asked this question, when the president of Dangote wake up to discover that this man had been living above his means, is it because he's standing his ground to ensure that nothing wrong is done in the industry, or is it because the man have refused to capitulate to regulator capture? We must separate the two issues. Nigerians are very, very emotional and sentimental. People have refused to look at the issues separately. These are two separate issues. Now, I want us to address the major issue which affects you and I, and that is the issue of the brickbats between NDPRA and Aliko Dangote. I am a player in this industry. By the special grace of God, I've lived over 50 years in Nigeria. I have worked over 25 years in the oil and gas industry and banking industry, and I understand the whole value chain excellently compared to what's happening in other parts of the world. The argument is, the crux of the matter, which has angered the Dangote Refinery, is that the NDPRA issued import permit to marketers to bring in products first quarter 2026. The argument of Dangote Refinery is that by the provisions of the PIA, if domestic refinery meets domestic consumption, that no new licenses will be issued. But we all know in this market and operationally that the Dangote Refinery is not producing anything even up to 30-40% of the domestic consumptions in Nigeria. And that is the reality, and that is the truth. And we must put this in focus. And we must also understand that in a country like Nigeria, yes, it is good to support domestic operators. It is good to support local entrepreneurship. But we must also understand the overarching interest of the average Nigerian. how do we reduce the cost of energy, the cost of petroleum products, down to where it was before the madness started in 2015. We are not the only oil-producing country in the whole world. We have contemporaries. I always use Brazil as an example. Brazil was suffering the same kind of things that we were suffering today: corruption, inefficiencies, breakback between operators and regulators, before the Brazilian government put their feet on the ground and unbundled the whole sector. Today, Brazilians are reaping the fruit of that reform. Brazil has crude oil reserve of 15.5 billion barrels. Today, they produce on a daily basis 3.8 million barrels of crude. They have 19 refineries in Brazil that refines 2.4 million barrels of white petroleum products. Brazilians' consumption of white petroleum products on average is about 1.92 million barrels. So Brazil produces almost 2 times what they consume. Yet, and I want it to be noted here, in 2024, Brazil allowed imports of over $23.2 billion worth of petroleum products. In fact, $15.2 billion worth of gasoline and gas oil, and $8.7 billion worth of crude oil. And this is a country that is a net producer of crude, a net producer of refined products. Why did they allow that? They allowed it because they understood clearly that despite the fact that they have 19 refineries operated by local, and note again, Petrobras is owned 72% by private investors and only 28% by the Brazilian government. The same call we have put upon the federal government to unbundle NMPC and allow it to have the same ownership and operational structure to enable us introduce efficiency and accountability in this industry. Why did the Brazilians allow? America has 130 refineries. They refine 18 million barrels of crude every day. In fact, the American aviation industry consumes 2 million barrels of crude, refined products, ATK, every day. Yet, Americans allow import of products. Even Saudi Arabia imports refined petroleum products from Dangote. Why do we say so? See, we must be very, very careful to eliminate emotions and sentiment. I believe in supporting productivity of local entrepreneurs. You subsidize production, you give incentives, you give us. As in your studio here, many times shared practically the structural dynamics on how we can bring together the operators in the downstream oil and gas sector, those in the refinery, those depot operators and owners, the haulagers, the vessel owners and truckers, and the retail stations, over 23,000 of them. I have shared with us here creatively how it works in other clients and how we can link up these 4 groups to work in a very cordial and profitable manner that does not impact the pocket of the average Nigerian. And not again in Brazil. Despite all these things, minimum wage in Brazil is 400,000 naira equivalent. A liter of PMS in Brazil is 1,600 naira equivalent. Minimum wage in Brazil can buy 250 liters of PMS. Minimum wage in Nigeria cannot even buy up to 60 liters of PMS. And the purchasing power of the average Brazilian is about 15 million naira. That of average Nigerian is less than 1.5 million. So we need to put this thing in context. If the battle is, Farouk is corrupt, let the authorities handle it. But on this issue of regulation, on this issue of trying to avoid one regulator capture, on this issue of trying to avoid and stop monopoly, abusive monopoly, I think I align slightly with the authorities at NMDPRA. And we must be very, very careful here. There's this argument, Aliko Dangote Refinery is too big, it's a private asset. Dangote refineries have OPL licenses. They should also take out time to explore and produce crude to serve themselves. And Nigeria is not the only market. You know, this crab mentality of fighting among ourselves is something I would not appreciate.
All right.
I expect those in authority to come together to see how we can work and bring together all the operators to enable us dominate the over 800 million man Southern African market.
Okay, just to now, piggyback on what you've said, you talked about how if this is an issue about avoiding regulations, you're definitely in support of the regulatory authorities. There are those who would argue that what Dangote has done is in some measure, yes, I mean, you spoke to monopoly as well, so I want you to address that. Because there are those who would argue that what Dangote has done is what successive governments have been trying to do and have not yet been able to do with all our refineries. You know, with the number of refineries that we have, still not being able to meet the demand of petrol. Now, the latest update is that they've cut it from 828 naira to 699 naira. That's about 129 naira cut in the gantry, and that will start to feel the effect in the coming days. So the average Nigerian just wants to buy petrol at a cheaper rate. They want to be able to have access to products when they need it. But you're speaking to monopoly. So help us find the balance in the middle of all of this.
Okay, let me address this. Why did he not cut it down to 600 naira per liter? Why did he leave it at 699 from 828? At what point did he wake up to realize that 805 was arbitrary, was manipulative, was extortionist to bring it down to 6993? At what point, and what was the reason behind it? You see, Nigerians need to investigate and ascertain the truth before taking sides. Like I said, I have nothing against. You see, you know, when we talk about, you remember the former CBN governor, Emefiele. I hope the press should be able to review this. In 2023, when that refinery was being commissioned, Emefiele gleefully regaled Nigerians on how the CBN supported massively that construction of that refinery, and how over 70% of the debts borrowed to finance it was repaid, even when that refinery has not produced a liter of the crude. I'm a project financier, I'm an investment bank, and I know that in project financing, when you're doing a project finance, you normally give 2-3 year moratorium to enable the project begin to produce. But a miraculous way in Nigeria, a project have not even begin to refine 1 liter, repaid 70% of the capital funds borrowed to finance it. We are all aware in this country what happened between 2015 to 2023. The federal government of Nigeria as a bank wholly and fully supported the building of that refinery through concessionary naira loans, through FS allocations in billions of dollars at official rate, when we had a gap between the official rate and the parallel market rate of over 200 naira. The federal government, so we expect the same support. We have many Nigerians holding licenses. If the federal government of Nigeria should extend the same support, the same incentive, the same boost to other operators in the downstream oil and gas sector, I think by now we should have been thinking about 10, 15 refineries operating in Nigeria. While we appreciate what he has done, we must also appreciate the overall interest of Nigerians is what we must consider. I have shared with us here practically how we can put in place a crude oil production, crude oil allocation, refine arrangement, distribution arrangement that will crash the price of a liter of the PMS, gas oil, to about 500 naira per liter, while all the players within that industry makes their margin. There is no company, no matter the ownership, that is too big to be regulated. The question is, what is the reason for this fight? Why must, let me ask this question, why must an entity insist that other players must be exited from the industry? I ask this question. Rotterdam, Netherlands does not have crude oil like Nigeria. Greece does not have crude oil like Nigeria. South Korea does not have crude oil like Nigeria, but they have refineries. How can a refinery in Rotterdam, a refinery in Greece, a refinery in South Korea buy crude oil from the international market, refine it and ship it 7,000 kilometers to Nigeria, and it still sells cheaper than products that were refined in Nigeria with crude in Nigeria that did not incur any logistics costs in moving those products? It's a question Nigerians will be asking themselves. Brazil is a thing. We cannot reinvent the wheel. In Brazil, with crude oil output of 3.8 million barrels a day, in Brazil, with 19 refineries, refining production that is 2 times their consumption, could allow import of $23.9 billion worth of products from Saudi Arabia, from the US, from Russia. Why is somebody scared of us allowing such competitiveness? I give you an example. Chivita in Nigeria, there was a time 5 Alive was dominated. People were importing 5 Alive and every kind of junk. The Lebanese came in, started Chivita. At the time, Chivita became cheaper and had better quality than 5 Alive. The owners of Coca-Cola, what they did was to buy into Chivita 55%. That is how it is done. If I am see, we know what we can do. Dangote Refinery, by the virtue of its size, by the virtue of its location, is supposed to produce and refine crude cheaper than any refinery. If any refinery or any marketer is, what we should be talking about is the quality of the products coming in. If the quality of the products coming in is the same thing as that of Dangote, we should allow it to come in. Competition will enhance effectiveness, will enhance production. The only thing we will do is that we will find a way of subsidizing production and supporting local producers. But to do a blanket ban and allow one man control the whole economy is dangerous to the healthiness of our economy.
Now, Dr. Obiaraeri, just yesterday, the man in the eye of the storm, the NMDPRA boss, Farouk Ahmed, did issue a statement saying that he's open to investigation. He also said that 3 of his 4 children in Switzerland enjoy merit-based scholarship that ranges from 40 to 65%. The essence of this is that, he says he's worked really hard, he's saved money, he's been in public service for over 30 years and has also made investments. So we're here one side of the story and the other side of the story. What should the government do at this point in time to clear the air? Because there are serious allegations that have been made, and Nigerians are waiting for a proper response because the implications are wide-reaching.
The truth is that Farouk Ahmed is in the eye of the storm because unfortunately he stepped on the toes of bigger fishes. Farouk Ahmed is just one out of the over 1 million Nigerians that operate in the public sector, both in the civil service and appointed officials. If we want to be honest and sincere to ourselves, if you are to subject every of the public servants in Nigeria to forensic investigation, 99% of them will fall within the same category. I've said it here. 90% of the properties in the high-brow areas or in Nigeria, from Banana Island to Maitama to Asokoro to other places, are owned by public servants. The average Nigerian public servant, 99% of them live above their means, and that is the truth. And if we want to checkmate it, we need to do a holistic overhaul. We need to put in place, we've made suggestions. There's other reports out there. There's other reports out there on how we can stop this nonsense. I've said it here. If we are very, very sincere, we should make asset declaration of public servants public. We should create an e-portal where before you assume office as a public official, even those of them from grade level 8 and above, every year before the end of the year, you go to so you submit you upload your CCB declarations. You upload what you own and what you owe in a very transparent manner. Number 2, we should also empower the CCB to put in place a whistle-blowing provision where if every Nigerian helps to blow, just like Aliko Dangote is blowing whistle now, if every Nigerian helps to blow a whistle that indicts a public official and help us recover an asset, 20% of the recovery will be given to him. Compulsory, and that makes every Nigerian an EFCC official because there will be no hiding place. And number 3, when we make this declaration public, in America, when Obama became president of America, Obama declared his assets and liabilities publicly. We knew what he owned and what he owed. When Obama retired, left office, we knew what he owned, and he declared clearly how he made those monies. In America, if you want to check any American public official, those of people, it's very easy for you to know what they own and what they own. In Nigeria, it's very, very difficult, and we know this truth. When we put in place these checkmate valves, but the truth is, who will bear the cat? You and I know that National Assembly will not pass such laws. You and I know that even the accusers of Farouk Ahmed will not agree for such provisions, and that is the truth. The truth, like I said, let us separate the 2 issues. I am not a defender of corruption and iniquity in Nigeria. I hate corruption with every fiber of blood in me. But what I want is the right thing to be done. If he's guilty, let him be investigated, let him be prosecuted. The same thing too, 99% of the police officers, I can bet my finger. If you subject even his accusers and each and every one of them to the same forensic investigation, none of them will come out guiltless. But let us separate the issues of what he has done or what he's being accused of and look at the issues of regulation, the issues of the healthiness of our industry. In fact, in Nigeria today, what we should be thinking about, Michael Lokpara and Obafemi Awolowo should have been thinking, how do we ramp up Nigerian crude oil output to 4 million barrels a day? We used to do 2.8 million barrels in 2010. How do we support other operators in the industry, from refinery to depot owners to haulage operators to filling stations operators to reduce the cost of production and the cost of white petroleum products in Nigeria. How do we increase refining capacity of Nigeria to 2.53 million barrels a day so that we can take over the whole 800 million man Southern Africa market? How do we bring together the workings between the refinery, Aliko Dangote refinery, other refineries, and the depot owners and IPMAN and DAPMAN members so that they can work? Let me tell you, all over the world, and I've said this, I will give you an example where I'm very agitated. Nigeria is the only place. You remember one of Olusegun Obasanjo told us how he supported Aliko Dangote in cement and other cement players, how he banned other cement importers and allowed him control of the cement, supported him, gave him incentives and everything. Today, the senior cement producers in China, that is 10 times bigger than Dangote, go and check their EBT, the earnings before interest, tax, admission allowance, is average of 21%. Nigeria is the only place where cement producers are making over 58% profit before tax. It's exploitative. And Nigerian cement production is practically over 90% domestic raw material supply. So how come Nigeria is the only place in the whole wide world where cement producers are having profits before tax rate of 58%, whereas all over the world the average is about 21-25%? There are no consumer protections in Nigeria. And anything, I expect us to be asking ourselves, what do we do to bring down the price of the PMS, gas oil, and diesel, and other things to 500 naira and below per liter? What do we do to catalyze productivity? What do we do to ensure that Nigerian businesses take over the whole 800 million man Southern Africa market? That should be our discussion. So that this crap war, Dangote fighting that man fighting Dangote, and all those stuff. Oh, I'm going to bring the 10,000 CNG trucks and blah, 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 blah. If you succeed in destroying 128 depot owners, investments worth over 300 billion naira, and over 100,000 jobs, what is the benefit for Nigeria? How do we reduce the number of poor people in Nigeria from 197 million to less than the 10 million it was 30 years ago? It's a question we should be asking. All this bickering and fighting is not the only way out. I expect the authorities, the president, and everybody to sit down. If they don't know how to do it, some of us have created templates on how we can help them execute this. But of course, in Nigeria, the pharaohs and Nebuchadnezzars do not look for those who have the ideas and who can help them. They believe and push most of their ideas based on clannishness and nepotism. And that is why we are where we are today.
Okay, you said you expect the president to the person to sit down. Let's ask, how you think that dispute resolution and going forward will look like. We've seen the House of Representatives also have stepped into the arena, civil societies have also made certain calls. So what would be the format for how you think this would be resolved?
Okay, I read about the invitation by the National Assembly. I can tell you only if nothing will come out of it. It's the same story. They will just call them, then do their everybody walks away. The truth is, if we want this market to work, all over the world, refinery margins are very thin. It's between 5-15%. The only refineries globally who are making margins over 21-25% are those that are integrated, like the Chevrons and the Shell, that integrate crude production to refinery. So I have shared with us here, confidentially, openly, how we can make Nigeria work. We have a 445,000 barrels that was supposed to be given to the 3 moribund local refineries. The federal government should work out an arrangement between Dangote, DAPMAN, depot operators, that is IPMAN, and the retail owners. We can have a special arrangement, set up a special arrangement where those crude will be allocated to Dangote at $41 or $45 per barrel. He will not put a margin of more than 15-20% based on global practice. Then the depot owners will not put their own margin more than 10%. The arrangement that he will not sell the products through the value chain except through the depot owners and operators, and minimum sales of at least 10-15 million liters per bulk sales, so they can move it through the storage centers for ease of distribution. And then the haulage owners and retail players will put their margin. Only if under this special arrangement, we've worked it out. If they adopt this measure for domestic consumption and production, a liter of the PMS, a liter of the diesel, a liter of the ATK, within the next 6 months, we sell for less than 500 naira per liter. and it will stop these skirmishes. Dangote and all the other refineries coming up will have opportunity of selling over to the West African countries, to Southern African countries. See, we have the power and capacity and energy and resources to dominate and become the supply hub of Southern Africa. But we must stop this bickering. We must come to provide creative solutions on how we can all work together. And that is where government and the knowledge steps in. If those in authority cannot do it, they can invite some of us to come and help them. And we'll put in place a structure that will protect every stakeholder. Because what do we want to do? We want to boost productivity. We want to help Mr. President achieve his $1 trillion sized economy in the next 5 years. We want an all-inclusive, prosperous country that will enable the man in Aba to buy a liter of fuel for 300 naira, 500 naira per liter to enable him power. I better pass my neighbor. If Nigeria is able to ramp up crude oil at 3 million barrels a day, and we meet our open quota, 1.7, 1.6 million barrels a day, the remaining can be refined there in Nigeria. In Brazil, in Saudi Arabia, in other oil-producing countries, they do everything humanly possible to reduce energy costs and energy prices within their economy. And this is what we should all be collectively thinking and pursuing, and not this bickering left and right and trying to destroy each other over nothing.
Now, Dr. Obiaraeri, when, realistically speaking, when would we be able to stop the importation of refined products? Because they say what we're looking for in Sokoto is now Sokoto. We are an oil-producing nation, and we have abundant reserves. We also have 4 refineries, and there's talks of more private refineries in the offing to save much-needed FX and also get the most out of the value chain instead of being a net exporter of crude. We can also look inwards and also supply the West African sub-region and indeed the whole world this refined products. Is it something that can happen within the next decade?
Okay, let me come here. You see, this argument we always make, when do we stop importation of white petroleum products into Nigeria? It's shocking because I don't know how we think the way we think in Nigeria. I've mentioned to you here, you know, what Nigeria produces is the Brent crude, the light crude. The light crude that is produced in Nigeria is not sufficient to produce the huge volume of base oil that is required to produce lubricant. The only refinery in Nigeria that was producing huge stock of base oil was the Kaduna Refinery. And Kaduna Refinery was constructed to consume heavy crude. And that was why we are importing heavy crude from Venezuela. The Kaduna Refinery was not configured to refine the light crude from Nigeria. And we must understand that. There are diverse range of derivative products that come out of crude. Saudi Arabia produces over 10 million barrels of crude every day. Saudi Arabia has 81 refineries. How come Saudi Arabia is importing aviation fuel from Dangote? Have we bothered to ask ourselves that question? America refines 80 million barrels of crude every day. America has 130 refineries. Why is America importing aviation fuel from Dangote Refinery? Have we bothered to ask that question? Our fixation should not be, oh, how do we ban importation? Our fixation should be, this is of FS scarcity. Because most of those who report to governors do not even understand economics and management like Michael Obara. If today Nigeria is producing 4 million barrels of crude every day, if today Nigeria is refining 2.5 million barrels of crude every day, if today Nigeria is generating 250, 300, 500 billion dollars from the agri sector, just like Netherlands is doing 1 to 2 billion euros, net, we are generating over $1 trillion into this economy. Even if we are importing $300 billion worth of crude petroleum products, we will have a net FX reserve of $700 billion, which will enable our naira to gain. It's a simple law of demand and supply. We are all making this argument because we're a very unproductive economy. We have allowed insecurity, we have allowed incompetencies, we have allowed mediocrity to permeate our public sector space. Between 1970 to 1970, we never had this argument. We were importing everything we wanted to import to catalyze productivity. Today, we know you need the aviation fuel, you need the heavy crude to produce to produce base oil and other derivatives, which our light crude could not produce. So will you say, okay, because we do not produce light crude, because we are producing 3 billion barrels of million barrels of light crude every day, we cannot import heavy crude? And the Brazilians stupid and silly, despite the fact that they are producing more crude oil than they are consuming, despite the fact that they are refining more than they are consuming, are they stupid to allow the importation of $8.7 billion worth of crude oil and $15.3 billion worth of gasoline and gas oil? Is Nigerian economy bigger than Brazilian economy? Today, as of 1970, Nigerian GDP per capita was $532. Brazilian GDP per capita was $329. We are bigger than Brazil in 1970. Today, Brazilian GDP per capita is $10,012. Nigerian GDP per capita is just about $1,000 after we have rebased, because we have refused to be productive. Between 1960 to 1970, when we had a productive nation, we were ahead of Indonesia, we were ahead of Brazil, we were ahead of Malaysia, we were ahead of South Korea. Today, we are competing with Yemen, with Afghanistan, with other debased countries, because we have refused to do the right thing. We have allowed the few elites to manipulate us and to allow the elites to destroy this country. The issue is not allowing import of white petroleum products. The issue is putting in place the right regulator and operational framework to enable productivity to be catalyzed locally. That is what we should be discussing.
All right. I'm sure we'll come back to this conversation in the nearest future. Thank you so much, Dr. Obiaraeri, for joining us and speaking with us. Maybe the next time we'll have you, we'll talk about the 2025 revenue target by the federal government. They say it's falling short by over 30 trillion naira. That's a different and separate conversation I would like to have you on. But thanks for your time.
Thank you.